The content in this video is based on factual, real-life events and public records. All opinions expressed are for educational and documentary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised, as some scenes may depict sensitive content. This video is intended for informative purposes and complies with YouTube's guidelines. Texas death row. At the far edge of Huntsville, where the prison walls rise like a concrete horizon, 3 men wait for the same ending. Each carries a different story, a different crime, and a different path to the chamber where the state of Texas closes the final chapter of a life. Their cases never intersected, their worlds never touched, yet their names now sit on the same list, the list reserved for the condemned. This is the story behind those names: 3 inmates, 3 murders, 3 final sentences. And it begins with the first man Texas has scheduled this year. His name is Marcus Hale, and his last sunrise is only hours away. What death row looks like. Death row in Texas is a place built from quiet. Not peace, just quiet. A long hallway with steel-barred doors on both sides, each holding a man who wakes up every morning knowing his date is printed somewhere in a folder he'll never see. Some men wait years, some wait decades, but none escape the ritual that defines this building. The slow, procedural approach of an ending they can't negotiate. Executions here follow a routine that's practiced, perfected, and unchanging. The method is almost always lethal injection, though history remembers painful failures, clogged lines, collapsed veins, and drugs that took longer than anyone expected. Texas perfected the process, but perfection doesn't erase fear. On death row, every inmate knows the stories of the ones before them. Tonight, the routine belongs to Marcus. If you enjoy real, gripping prison documentaries and true stories, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with your friends and family. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss more shocking and exclusive content. The life and crime of Marcus Hale. Before his prison ID replaced his name, Marcus Hale was a 29-year-old warehouse worker from Conroe, Texas. He had no previous violent record, no history of crime that predicted what was coming. But one night, a robbery spiraled into something irreversible. According to the case file, Marcus walked into Jefferson Mart, a small family-owned convenience store, planning to steal cash to cover overdue bills. What prosecutors said, and what Marcus later admitted, was that he was high, desperate, and reckless. Inside the store was David Callister, a 56-year-old father, well known in the neighborhood for keeping the shop open late, so teenagers had somewhere safe to go after school. When Marcus pulled out his gun, David hit an alarm button under the counter. Marcus panicked. A single shot. A life gone. 1 second of fear that turned Marcus into a murderer. The victim's family. David Callister left behind a wife, Elaine, and 2 grown daughters. They attended every court hearing, sat through every appeal, listened to every expert, and every argument Marcus's attorneys made. Elaine never spoke publicly, but one sentence from her in court echoed through the years. He took the safest man I knew. I want the state to finish what he started. Her daughters were more conflicted. One wanted justice. The other wanted closure without death. But in Texas, the decision wasn't theirs. The jury recommended death, and the state signed the warrant. Life on death row. Marcus spent 9 years on death row. He read more books than he had in his entire life before prison. He wrote letters to his mother every week. To the guards, he wasn't a problem. To the chaplain, he was reflective. To himself, he was a man who couldn't undo the past. He never denied what he did. He never argued that the system got it wrong. But he feared the execution. He feared the moment, the slow countdown, the final walk. The idea that his death might be painful haunted him more than the idea of dying itself. Texas had changed its drug supplier years before, and rumors about the injection circulated constantly. Some inmates said it burned, some said it didn't work quickly, some said it felt like drowning from the inside. Marcus had no way of knowing the truth until it was his turn. The execution day. On the morning of his execution, the sun rose orange over the Huntsville unit. Marcus was moved to the death watch cell, only a few feet from the chamber itself. The walls here are cleaner, the lights brighter, and the air heavier. At 6 a.m., The warden stopped by. Marcus nodded, trying to look composed, but his hands shook slightly. The chaplain visited next. They prayed, not for freedom, just for mercy in the final minutes. Texas scheduled his execution for 6 p.m. His mother, Nadine Hale, flew in from Arizona. She visited him at noon through the plexiglass barrier. It was their last conversation. She told him she forgave him, she loved him, and she would be in the witness room when the moment came. Marcus broke down. It was the only time he cried that day. The victim's family before the execution. In another room, David Callister's family arrived hours before the injection. The tension between the sisters still existed. One believed the execution was justice. The other believed the state was repeating the violence that destroyed their family. Elaine sat silent, hands folded, eyes forward. She had waited 9 years for this. When asked if they wanted to view the execution, all three said yes. The final walk. At 5:53 p.m., a guard opened Marcus's door. Time. He stood, took one deep breath, and walked out. He didn't resist. He didn't stumble. The hallway to the execution chamber seemed endless, though it was only 30 seconds long. Inside the chamber, the table waited. He lay down, and the staff strapped him in. The needle entered his arm after several attempts. The veins in his arm were thin from years of stress and poor health. He winced but stayed still. When asked for a final statement, Marcus spoke softly. To the Callister family, I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. To my family, I love you. I didn't want this to define me, but I know it does. The execution. The drugs flowed. Lethal injection in Texas includes 3 stages: sedation, paralysis, and cardiac arrest. Marcus exhaled slowly. His eyes fluttered. His chest tightened, rising once, twice, and then no more. It took 10 minutes. Not fast, not peaceful, but final. Aftermath. In the witness room, Elaine remained still. The daughter who supported the execution nodded once, as if confirming something she'd waited years to see. The other daughter turned away, tears falling silently. Down the hall, Marcus's mother collapsed into a chair when they pronounced him dead. She had begged the board for clemency. She had prayed the governor would intervene. Neither happened. She left Huntsville without speaking to reporters, without looking back at the prison. Marcus Hale was gone. A crime, a life, and a death sealed forever. Before dawn breaks over East Texas, a different inmate waits for a different kind of death. The state has scheduled 3 executions this season, each one separated by weeks, but tied together by the same stark machinery of justice. The first was swift, predictable, clinical. The second will not be. The second man on the list, Colton Reyes, is set to face one of the most controversial methods in Texas history: nitrogen hypoxia. Recently approved, rarely used, and deeply feared on the row, it promises a death without blood, yet with uncertainty that shakes even seasoned officers. Colton knows all of this, and as the clock drags toward his final hour, his story unfolds with a different kind of weight. One built not from panic, but from the years he spent pretending he wasn't guilty until the truth finally drowned him. The crime of Colton Reyes. Before he became inmate number 999842, Colton James Reyes was a 33-year-old oilfield technician from Midland, Texas. The kind of man neighbors described as quiet, kept to himself, didn't cause trouble. But the police report paints a very different picture. On a cold February night in 2014, Colton was seen arguing outside a bar with Ryan Tully, a local EMT and father of one. Witnesses said the argument began over parking space. The tension escalated, alcohol blurred judgment, and within minutes, fists turned into violence that spiraled beyond control. The fight ended in the alley behind the bar. Ryan never got up. Colton fled the scene, driving home with his knuckles bleeding and his mind fogged by adrenaline. It took officers 18 hours to track him down. The jury took less time to convict him than the fight itself lasted. Murder during the commission of a violent felony. Death eligible in Texas. Colton insisted that he didn't mean to kill Ryan, that it wasn't planned, that he lost control. But the Tully family didn't care about intention. They cared about the empty seat at their dinner table. The victim's family. Ryan's wife, Caroline Tully, became the face of the case, calm, articulate, and unwavering. She attended every hearing with a framed photo of Ryan in his EMT uniform. She spoke at sentencing with a voice that never cracked. He saved lives for a living. He didn't deserve to lose his own to someone who couldn't control himself. Their daughter, only 7 at the time, sat with her grandmother during court sessions. Too young to understand death sentences, old enough to understand that her father wasn't coming home. When the state confirmed that Colton would die by nitrogen hypoxia, Caroline called it appropriate. Critics called it experimental. The state called it acceptable. And Colton had no choice but to accept the decision. Life on death row. Colton wasn't like most inmates on the row. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He didn't lash out at guards or inmates. Instead, he stayed quiet, eerily quiet. He spent his days reading legal documents, writing appeals, and replaying the night of the murder in his head until it became a nightmare that didn't need sleep to appear. Some inmates feared the injection. Colton feared the gas. He'd heard rumors. You choke. You panic. Your lungs claw for oxygen that isn't there. The state denied the rumors. But inmates live off the stories of those before them, and there were very few stories to go around. As his date approached, Colton became more introspective. He finally admitted guilt, not to the courts, but to the chaplain. He said he couldn't keep pretending he didn't know what he did. He said he wanted Ryan's family to know the truth, but he didn't know how to say it. The execution day. The morning of his execution carried a strange atmosphere, quiet even for death row. Colton was moved to death watch at 6 a.m. The guards noticed his calmness. No panic, no tears, just acceptance. At noon, he received a visit from his younger brother, Elias Reyes, the only family member who ever came. They talked through glass, both men trying to hold onto the pieces of a childhood far removed from Huntsville's walls. Elias begged him to ask for a stay. Colton refused. It won't bring Ryan back, he said, but maybe it ends something for his family. The victim's family before the execution. In a separate building, the Tully family waited. Caroline sat beside her daughter, now a teenager, who had chosen to attend voluntarily. When reporters asked why, she said, "I want to see justice. My dad didn't get a breathe. Neither should he." Her words spread quickly, dividing public opinion. But Texas moves forward regardless of opinion. The nitrogen chamber had been prepared. The witnesses were escorted to their seats. The staff ran final checks. The atmosphere was heavy with uncertainty. Even the guards, not new to death, walked slower than usual. The final walk. At 6:48 p.m., they opened Colton's door. He stood up immediately. No hesitation. No questions. The hallway was silent, except for the echo of boots on concrete. The nitrogen chamber was colder than he expected, a white-walled, stainless steel-lined room that looked like science fiction had swallowed a prison cell. He sat in a restraint chair. The straps tightened across his arms and legs. A mask was fitted over his face. The warden asked if he had any last words. Colton's voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. To the Tully family, "I'm sorry. I failed as a man. I failed as a human. I don't ask forgiveness. I only hope this gives you something I couldn't give myself. Closure." Caroline didn't blink. Her daughter didn't look away. The execution. The signal was given. The process began. Nitrogen replaced oxygen through the mask, an invisible shift that changed everything in seconds. Colton inhaled. His breathing quickened, then slowed. Witnesses said his eyes stayed open longer than expected, watchful, almost searching. His chest rose and fell a few more times before the movements stopped completely. The process took longer than state officials predicted. Some said the room felt colder afterward. Some said the silence afterward was louder than the machine. But at 7:12 p.m., the warden announced the time of death. The second execution of the season was complete. Aftermath. The Tully family left quietly. Caroline placed a photo of Ryan back in her purse and told reporters, "Justice isn't supposed to feel good. It's supposed to feel necessary." Her daughter didn't speak at all. Down the hallway, Elias waited for the confirmation. When he heard the words, "time of death," his shoulders collapsed inward. He thanked the chaplain for staying with his brother. He asked for Colton's belongings. And then he left the prison grounds alone. For the second time in as many weeks, Huntsville returned to stillness. 2 men gone. 1 more to go. By the time Texas schedules its 3rd execution of the season, the men on death row all know the pattern. The calm, the press, the witnesses, the ritual. But this final case breaks from the pattern. Not because of the crime, not because of the inmate, but because of the method Texas selected, where the first man faced lethal injection, and the second endured nitrogen hypoxia. The third is sentenced to a method nearly vanished from American prisons, the firing squad. The law allows it. Texas rarely touches it. But for Jackson Merritt, the third name on the list, the state has decided to resurrect an old ending. His story is the hardest, not because of the violence, but because of the collision between guilt, denial, and a family that believed him, until the truth surfaced too late. Who Jackson Merritt was. Before the jumpsuit, before the headlines, before the death warrant, Jackson Reed Merritt was a 27-year-old paramedic in Lubbock. He was the type people trusted instinctively, calm under pressure, the guy who held strangers' hands in ambulances and promised they were going to be okay. The community respected him. His co-workers admired him. His family adored him, which made the murder harder for anyone to understand. The crime. On May 18, 2016, police responded to a call in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The 911 call came from a neighbor who heard yelling, followed by what she described as something heavy hitting the floor. Inside the home, officers found Samantha Price, a 24-year-old nursing student, dead in her living room. She lived alone. She had no known enemies. Nothing was stolen, but there was DNA. There were fingerprints, and every piece pointed to Jackson. At first, Jackson denied even knowing her. But cell tower data, text logs, and testimony later revealed what the courtroom would call an obsessive, one-sided fixation. Samantha had met Jackson once at a community CPR event. He interpreted friendliness as interest. When she didn't respond to his messages, his behavior escalated quietly. Messages, then unannounced visits. Then the night everything ended. The prosecution argued he confronted her. She told him to leave, and the situation spiraled. The exact details never became perfectly clear because Jackson claimed he blacked out. The jury saw deliberate violence. The judge saw intent. Texas saw a death-eligible murder. He received the ultimate sentence. The victim's family, Samantha's parents, Howard and Melinda Price, attended every hearing wearing purple ribbons, her favorite color. They sat in silence most days, avoiding reporters, avoiding headlines, avoiding anything except the trial itself. During sentencing, Melinda spoke with a trembling voice that didn't hide her anger. She saved lives. She was going to be a nurse. You stole our future. The law is giving you an ending she never got. Their grief wasn't loud. It was steady, and steady grief becomes something sharp. They requested to witness the execution. They said they'd waited long enough. Life on death row. Jackson's time on death row was unlike the other 2 men. He maintained innocence for years, insisting he was framed, insisting evidence was manipulated, insisting the justice system didn't want the truth. Some inmates believed him. Some guards didn't know what to think. Even the chaplain said Jackson's conviction was unusual, not because of the evidence, but because of the intensity of his denial. But in 2023, everything shifted. A letter surfaced, one he wrote the night of the murder, one he hid behind a drywall panel in his old house. When the new homeowner found it and turned it in, the letter shattered his narrative completely. It contained enough detail that even Jackson couldn't claim fabrication. After reading the copy handed to him by his lawyer, he broke down. It was the first time he cried in prison. The first time he whispered, "I did it." From that moment on, he stopped appealing, stopped rejecting interviews, stopped pretending. But the method the state selected frightened him deeply. Texas reinstates the firing squad. Because of lethal injection shortages and legal disputes over nitrogen supply, Texas invoked a long and used option, the firing squad. 5 rifles, 4 with live rounds, 1 with a blank. No way to know who fired the fatal shot. The victim's family supported the choice. Jackson did not. The fear wasn't the pain. It was the violence. The sound, the impact, the knowledge that 5 rifles pointed at your heart are waiting for a signal. He wrote to his mother, "I wish it could be anything else. I know I deserve punishment. I just can't stop imagining it." The execution day. The morning arrived colder than expected. Not weather, emotion. Even guards who had worked dozens of executions felt a knot settle in their stomachs. Jackson was moved to death watch. Breakfast went untouched. The chaplain sat with him for hours. He was calmer than anyone predicted. Not peaceful, just empty. At 2 p.m., his mother, Patricia Merritt, visited. She held a glass, crying silently. She kept apologizing, as if she were the one being executed. Jackson apologized too, but he never asked for forgiveness. He told her to go home, that he didn't want her to witness what was coming. She refused. She said, "If they're taking you from me, they're taking me from you last." The victim's family before the execution. In the witness room next door, Samantha's parents waited. Beside them sat Samantha's younger brother, now an adult, who had never spoken publicly about the case. When asked why he came, he said, "I need to see the world take him out of it." Their grief had evolved into something colder but steadier, a force that doesn't fade, doesn't bend, doesn't forgive. The final walk. At 5:57 p.m., 3 minutes before the scheduled time, the door opened. Jackson walked out slowly, not resisting, not begging, just pale, just tired. The firing squad chamber was stark, nothing like the injection room or nitrogen cell. It looked more like a warehouse built for a single purpose. He was positioned against a chair bolted to the floor. A target was pinned over his heart. The straps tightened across his limbs. When asked for final words, he spoke clearly. "For the Price family, I was wrong. I took something from you I can't fix. I hope this is the ending you need. To my family, I'm sorry you're here to see this. No theatrics, no anger, just finality." The execution. The warden lifted his hand. A red cloth dropped. The rifles fired. The sound was immediate, sharp, brutal, echoing through the chamber like metal splitting the air. There was no prolonged struggle, no uncertainty. The medical team confirmed death within moments. The room fell silent, as if even the walls struggled to absorb the violence. The third execution of the season ended at 6:04 p.m. Aftermath. Samantha's family left without speaking to reporters. Her mother leaned on her husband as they walked out. Their faces didn't show relief, just completion. Jackson's mother collapsed the moment she stepped outside. Family friends held her up as the chaplain escorted her to the parking lot. Inside the prison, officers worked quietly, their movements slower than usual. Firing squad executions take an emotional toll few admit out loud. 3 men, 3 methods, 3 endings shaped by the same system. Texas returned to stillness, but the stories, these stories, never really leave. They stay in the air, in the walls, in the memories of everyone who witnessed them. The season of executions had finally closed, but the weight of it still hung over Huntsville like a storm that never fully passes.